Makalipas ang 4 na araw ng paglilitis, matatapos na ba ang pagtitiis? Pagtitiis na muling makita ang tatay ng mga taga-suporta at pagtitiis naman sa hustisya ng mga naulila ng mga biktima. Nakapaglatag na ng ebidensya ang prosekusyon at ang depensa. Kanya-kanya na ring abang sa susunod na eksena. Ang tanong ngayon ng sambayanan, mananatili ba si dating Pangulong Rodrigo Duterte na nakakulong or will the ICC bring him home? Magandang hapon, ako si Midori Tachibana at ito ang Duterte sa ICC, ang koolNews special coverage sa confirmation of charges hearing ni dating Pangulong Rodrigo Duterte. Simulcast tayo ngayon sa 89.5 Manila SDR, 96.7 SF Radio at sa official Twitch at YouTube channels ng koolFM. Iyan ang istorya ng huling araw ng pagbabasa ng sakda laban sa dating Pangulo. Kahapon, iginiit na walang nangyaring karumal-dumal na pagpatay noong kasagsagan ng dating administrasyon sa kabila ng mga biglaang pagputol na makaganapan sa loob ng pre-trial Chamber 1. Nananaig pa rin ang panawagan ng hustisya para sa mga kamag-anak ng mga pinatay dahil sa laban sa illegal na droga. Kasalukuyan po nating inaantay ang pagbubukas ng sesyon ng confirmation of charges hearing dito sa ICC. Ito po ang huling araw ng isang linggong confirmation of charges hearing sa kanya. Meron po tayong schedule ngayon. I believe magsiskip na tayo sa submissions of merits ng defense. Nagawa na nila yan kahapon at I'm presuming na magtutungo na tayo sa closing statements ng bawat kampo. Iyan ang prosecution na pinangungunahan ni Prosecutor Mami Mandiayenyang, ang common legal representative of the victims na pinangungunahan naman ni Attorney Paulina Masida at ang closing statements ng depensa na pinangungunahan naman ni Nicholas Kaufman. Sila po ay binigyan ng 30 minuto para tapusin ang kanilang mga paglalahad ng closing statements dito sa harap ng mga huwes. At mamaya naman sa huling sesyon ng mga alas 9 ng gabi dito sa Pilipinas, alas 2 sa The Hague ay magkakaroon po ng paglilitis kung saan maririnig yung review kung titingnan kung ang suspect ba ay makukulong sa The Hague or papalayain muna for the time being. Iyan po ang mga kaganapan ngayon dyan sa ICC. Mamaya po magsisimula ang stream dito sa mga nanonood at sa mga nakikinig. Ayan, magandang hapon po sa inyo lahat. At maraming salamat po sa pagsama sa amin sa mga nakalipas na araw mula noong unang araw ng confirmation of charges hearing sa EDSA hanggang ngayong huling araw. Inaabangan na lang natin. Sa ilang saglit lamang ay makikita na ang mga kaganapan sa loob ng pre-trial Chamber 1. Ayan. Natin ngayon, wala pa tayong masyadong kaganapan sa mga sandaling ito. At hindi pa po nagsisimula na ngayon kasalukuyan ang proceedings pero hindi po ito iba-broadcast until 5:30 PM dito sa Pilipinas. That is for security reasons. At kung napansin nyo nga kahapon ay Kung napansin niyo nga kahapon ay yung reduction ng proceedings ni mga proceedings ni Kaufman doon sa kanyang depensa ay nare-redact. Ito po ay dahil napagalitan po siya ni Judge Julia Motok to not include any identifying information regarding the victims or the witnesses na kinuha ng prosecution para ma tawag dito, proof kung ito bang paglili kung ito bang paglilitis na ito ay worth going to trial. At ina-affirm ng prosecution team na malakas po ang ebidensya. Same with the victims' families, ina-affirm nila na ito daw po ay matatag ang kanilang kaso. It's a very strong case according to analysts dito sa Pilipinas. So what we're going to expect, I don't know if ang defense ay magpapatuloy pa sa kanilang proceedings. Pero we're going to expect na there will be a possibility na meron pong reduction sa end ni na Nicholas Kaufman dahil po hindi nga po pwede dahil sa Rome Statute ay pinagbabawal po ang paglabas ng mga identifying information on the victims or the witnesses dyan sa loob ng proceedings ng ICC. Hindi po pwede yan. Yun, tatanong natin yan sa ating panel. Inaantay lang natin kung kakayanin ba na sagutin nila ngayon. Pero kung kayo po ay natutok dito sa paglilitis sa ICC, ito po ay isang makasaysayang paglilitis para sa atin dahil there was a tweet that I read na hindi lang pala si Duterte ang nililitis kundi tayong mga Pilipino. This should have been for a segment of mine sa KNP na kung nililitis tayo bilang isang bansa regarding the morality of what we have achieved dito sa ICC. And I meant that in a negative manner dahil nakikita naman natin ang laganap na pagbalahura sa mga alaala nitong mga biktima ng extrajudicial killings dito sa kanyang war on drugs. Inaabangan lang talaga natin kung handa na ba ang ating panel na sumalang dito sa ating dito sa ating paglilitis sa huling araw ng confirmation of charges. Yan, inaantay lang talaga natin to. 3 po ulit ang sesyon ngayong araw. Ito po ay may possibility po na baka hindi na tumuloy ang depensa sa kanilang submission of merit sa kasong ito. Didiretso na sa closing statements at pagre-review kung ididetine ba ang dating Pangulo dito sa International Criminal Court Detention Center. But seeing from a lot of reactions on social media, some have been disappointed by the defense's stance regarding dito na hindi na mas marami daw ang surrenderies kaysa sa mga namatay. Samantalang hindi naman ipinagbubunyi naman ng mga kampo ng mga taga-suporta ni Duterte na strongman si Duterte. At nakita natin yung kanilang pagpuna sa kredibilidad ng mga witness, ng kredibilidad ng kanilang mga ebidensya kung saan ay pinapaniwalaan na ang mga witnesses daw ay ibinigay lang sa kanila ng kusa ng isang tao. Hindi natin alam kung sino ang taong iyon. At meron pang nag-undermine ng kanilang meron pang nagbulgar umano na di umano ay yung mga ICC daw. Inireveal ang mga pangalan ng mga investigador ng ICC na pumunta dito sa Pilipinas. Nasabi ay binigyan daw ng pera ni Saldico dito para daw maibigay ang mga witnesses na ito dyan sa International Criminal Court. And now, we're joined by our panel who has been paneling with us since Monday. Anima, thank you for joining us.
Good afternoon, koolFM. Hello.
Good afternoon. Alam mo naman, bugbog na ang iyong isip, lalo na
Yep.
kahapon
I
sa
know.
mga kaganapan ng depensa. Pero,
Yeah. Just a
just
normal
how
day.
yeah, just I want to ask you this first question: how unethical was the redaction, the reveal of identifying information ng kampo ng depensa sa mga buhay ng mga witnesses ng prosecution? Just
On so many levels, Mido, even as a mental health professional, that would be a violation actually. If Kaufman was here in the Philippines, for example, violation of RA 10175, Data Privacy Act. And in my case, as a psychometrician, we exercise integrity. Yes, integrity and confidentiality as one of our principles in the PAP Code of Ethics. And the fact that Kaufman mentioned names of war on drugs victims, he simply put their lives at risk with that. But fortunately, at least the ICC redacted it through their private sessions, which is valid, but still it's unaccounted for. Hoffman is a veteran already in his field, and yet he made something unethical. He should be aware of that, especially at his age. To be honest. And how will this affect the decision of the ICC? I don't think it will do anything because, well, in chess, for example, if let's say a player has screwed up their lead, that's what you call a blunder. Hoffman did twice worse than that. So yes, I would say whatever Kaufman said, not only he put the war on drugs victims' lives at risk, but also he potentially made them targets for disinformation attacks, and worst case scenario, a potential manhunt, unauthorized or slash illegal manhunt from one of the DDS followers or trolls, because who knows who's armed and who isn't. That's the purpose of maintaining security and safety, especially in a world class institution like the ICC.
Mhm. And you mentioned jeopardizing the witnesses um lives, pero I believe these are protected by the ICC, correct?
They are.
And I'm assuming na naka safe house ito sa isang undisclosed location, but where exactly? Near The Hague? Or what exactly is the process of witness protection in the context of the ICC?
Okay, because I am not honestly familiar with the ICC's facilities, including the fact that we have to mention the safety and security of the war on drugs victims. I would say because they are under witness protection, they are probably taken care of, or what do you call this? They were treated, I believe, in a highly confidential facility where their needs are met, and at the same time they will be able to stay throughout the remainder until this trial ends.
Mhm.
So for, let's say, to respect their confidentiality, I would say in a highly confidential location, where the ICC has provided their needs for the rest of the
Mm.
week, I believe.
Mm. Kasi I'm reading na uh, Judge Julia Motok reiterated this kahapon na ang prosecution, well, this is in the case of the prosecution, pero kasi ang nangyari kahapon is on the defense side, pero I believe this applies to both parties na they are do not disclose at any stage of the proceedings documents or information that the prosecutor obtains on the condition of confidentiality and solely for the purpose of generating new evidence unless the provider of the information consents.
Yes.
This is a key provision for receiving sensitive information from sources who require confidentiality. This is in paragraph 3F of Article 54 of the Rome Statute.
Mm-hmm.
Pero kasi, ang key info dito is that this was the defense's doing, not the prosecution.
Yes.
So what changes there?
What changes? I believe in the stance of the defense. You mean, if that's what you're asking? To clarify, me though.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so the
Yes, yes.
defense, so with the how it will change the stance of the defense. Here's how they would be able to reframe that. If they respect if they respect the confidentiality of the war on drugs victims, in the first place, somehow it would let's say it would have a silver lining for them, especially in justifying the killings of the war on drugs which President Duterte did. But because we all know that that's a boundary violated, especially according to the Roman statute, and at the same time, if it were to be applied in my field, they would violate integrity, and at the same time, uh the violation of confidentiality, especially informed consent, because you're supposed to get permission from the client to reveal personal data before revealing it to the public for transparency purposes. But in this case, what Kaufman did was he made it personal, and that's not even necessary. So how is the defense going to reframe this? First, apologize for that the apologize for the oversight, and at the same time for their carelessness in mentioning the names of the war on drugs victims. And secondly, provide substantial evidence, not hearsays, not general statistics. We want concrete evidence if they want us to believe in them. And lastly,
Mhm.
if they want to change their stance, yes, they have to prove that President Duterte war on that Duterte's war on drugs is lawful through the means of rehabilitation, if there's any proof, and that and the second and secondly, if indeed those statistics that Kaufman showed
Mhm.
yesterday were indeed
Mhm.
legitimate, he should show those images that the ICC, they should show raw footages of the same
Mhm.
footages, maybe, or similar footages like what the ICC showed, in order probably to turn the tables in that case. So
Mhm.
that's one of the few ways I believe that
Mhm.
the defense could change their stance. But as how we look at it here, it looks bleak. It looks bleak,
Mhm.
unless there may be a small silver lining that could probably convince the ICC, which I do not know what it is, but probably concrete substantial evidence if they have one.
Mhm. And, well, I wanted to ask, kasi sinabi mo kanina yung about jeopardization of of the lives of the witnesses and the victims. And I just want to know from a psychological perspective, how damaging would it be for this information to be public, and um the fact that Kaufman did made it public, and to seemingly deliberately parang i-jeopardize yung buhay nila. Anong implication nun on the victims and the witnesses side?
Okay, so we are going to see multiple circumstances regarding what Kaufman did in a psychological perspective regarding the war on drugs victims. Number one, the dehumanization of their situations. Why is that? 'Di ba nabanggit ni Kaufman that it was an act of self-defense and the media is to blame for. How is that dehumanization? Ang ginawa kasi especially ng mga followers, especially mga troll farms on social media, is to label drug addicts as suspects. In fact, drug addicts are not suspects, but rather those who are in need of medical assistance. This is identified under the Diagnostics and Statistics Manual, 5th edition. Wait, Manual of Mental Disorders, 5th edition, I'm sorry. And substance-induced disorders are classified as medical diagnosis. Therefore, they should not be weaponized, but rather recognized as official medical diagnosis that needs urgent intervention. Drug addicts are simply victims of a socio-economic system that fails to support them. Secondly, I want to emphasize that I did mention that the safety of the war on drugs victims are indeed at risk if their names were indeed mentioned, because their attorney has even mentioned before in day one, if I'm not mistaken, day one, which is according to attorney Joel Butuyan, that they are victims of a disinformation attack, a digital disinformation attack that has solely affected their reputation negatively on social media and has framed them to be the actual suspects, when in fact they were, like I said, they were framed to be the suspects. If they want to differentiate, if they want justice to be proper in the first place, like what I said before, differentiate between what is a drug addict and what is a drug pusher. A drug addict is a victim. A drug pusher has the intent to commit crime, regardless if they value human life or not.
Mm.
And lastly, I want to emphasize the increase of mental health stigma. What Duterte implemented was a war on drugs, not just on the drug lords, but ironically on the poor, which made it easier for him uh which made it, well, easier for him to exploit those people, since they are in the lower class and they have no money, and they have, unfortunately, no expenses to buy any to pay for any legal action against his administration. Therefore, what Duterte did is not just an act against crimes against humanity, it also means that he amplified he terribly amplified the mental health stigma through labeling drug addicts as criminals.
Mm.
And because of this, people do not know the definition of a drug addict. As
Mm.
someone from the mental health field, we all know that there's a lot of different kinds of mental health disorder. Let's say, for example, depression being one of the most common diagnoses or disorders in the world globally, according to the World Health Organization. Since 2020, since the pandemic, it can be triggered by
Mm.
environment. It can be triggered by biological factors, environmental factors, social, psychological, even spiritual, especially neurological in that case. There are numerous causes in depression, and it's not just limited to drugs in that case. In fact, drugs can amplify depression, but it does not necessarily cause criminal behavior. So how do you identify a drug addict from a drug pusher again? Drug addicts, like I said, are victims of the environment that failed to support them, and drug pushers have the intent to do something illegal as long as it benefits their self-interest. So therefore, so therefore, the proof provided by Kaufman, especially his justifications, not only harms the war on drugs victims, but also puts labels those, especially those
Mm.
diagnosed with mental health disorders, at risk of getting
Mm.
discriminated by other by
Mm.
by other Duterte followers, even by other Filipinos, sadly, because we lack mental health education here in the Philippines,
Mm.
and that is a must in every single school.
Mm. And well, we have got to okay. We have got to cut our
No problem.
analysis there. The live stream of the final day of the confirmation charges of hearing dito kay dating Pangulong Rodrigo Duterte, it will be starting in a few minutes. And Anima, what are you looking forward to in the closing statements dito ng mga kampo ng huwes?
I would expect the finalization of evidences from both the prosecution of the ICC versus the prosecution of Duterte's team, and
Mm.
we would expect possible follow-ups, some things we may
Mm.
not have heard in the past days, probably troll farms likely to be mentioned because as we mentioned before, they are unfortunate victims of this information, including Judge Yulia Motok, Madam Judge Yulia Motok, and the rest of the ICC judges are unfortunately targets of Duterte's troll farm disinformation. And
Mm.
secondly, what I would expect, yes, the finalization, probably the result, the discussion, the summary of what has transpired. And third, I did hear that the trial, it would take 60 days, according to my research, uh,
Mm.
for the ICC to decide whether if Duterte is convicted or guilty of those crimes or not. So the least that what we would expect is the finalization of Duterte's case.
Mm. Just to clarify on some of Anima's points, ngayon pa lang po ay confirmation of charges hearing. So basically, it would determine whether the evidence is sufficient enough for this case to go on trial. Kuya Pao said this yesterday na I believe this was yesterday or last Tuesday, but I believe he said na kahit isa sa tatlong counts na isinampa dito sa International Criminal Court ay may chance to go on trial. And that is where the actual trial, presentation of all the evidences will take place dito sa loob ng ICC. And that would actually determine whether he is guilty or not of these crimes against humanity. Um, so ang decision po ng uh, ng Trial Chamber 1 ay lalabas within 60 days after a confirmation hearing. So, I believe that would be on April 27 or April 23. We don't know yet, but sometime that week it would we would know if it is going to trial. Pero ano do you think the case is strong here for
Definitely.
mm,
For from the ICC,
yep.
you mean? Yes.
If it's enough to go to trial.
For me, yes, because of the gravity of the gravity and of the evidences which correlates to Duterte's crimes against humanity. I would say
Mm,
definitely, unless there would be follow-ups in the future even after this trial. So
mm,
while crimes against humanity is the major case implicated in the case, we would expect
mm.
other cases to follow up. Probably
Okay.
such as media disinformation, obstruction of justice, for example. Why is that? I want to mention that. Because we all know that the DDS trolls love to fabricate information and twist the narrative against the ICC. That
Mm,
is what you call obstruction of justice, and I'm 100% confident that's a violation as well of the Rome Statute. And if it is
mm,
proven, maybe it will be mentioned later, but who knows? Duterte will not just be Duterte will not just be uh convicted of such crime. Even his accomplices, his co-perpetrators, everyone from A to Z in his hierarchy will become co-perpetrators and culprits of their own. That's how I can finalize
mm.
that.
Okay, thank you for mentioning yung obstruction of justice kasi there is actually an article on the Rome Statute against the regarding obstruction of justice and um pero this is I think a um very different angle from what you from what I believe ito ay kasama din yung intervention ng mga trolls kasi on Article 70 parenthesis 1 C it says na ang Article 70 lists following acts as an offense. And letter C says, corruptly influencing a witness, obstructing or interfering with the attendance or testimony of a witness, retaliating against a witness for giving testimony, or destroying or tampering with or interfering the collection of with the collection of evidence. And then letter D includes impeding, intimidating, or corruptly influencing an official of the court for the purpose of forcing or persuading the official to not perform or to perform improperly their duty. So what is that exactly? Like can you break it down before this trials begins?
Okay, so let's summarize that short and simple because we all know that the ICC is gonna start anytime now with respect to them. So you mentioned the Rome Statute. What the actions of the DDS trolls, of course, when I said obstruction of justice, one of it is to has an indirect influence on the decision making of the ICC, especially the war on drugs victims. Why is that? Like we said, there's security and safety is threatened. And secondly, the ICC judges have become targets of this information made by the DDS trolls, and that likely will add more salt to the wound in Duterte's case. And
Mm,
lastly, about obstruction of justice. Regardless of how many fabricated news the DDS may make, even regardless of how many scripts they may make, to convince the public that it's the ICC's fault, Duterte was trying to protect us, whatsoever. It still will not change the fact that Duterte did indeed did innocent lives during his term. That's something that they cannot change from the narrative. And
Mhm.
with the obstruction of justice, uh any attempt to influence the justice system, especially the ICC, is honestly a grave violation under the Rome Statute. So if they do not stop those actions, there's a high chance the ICC will go after them. But if not the ICC in person, probably are the local authorities in that case.
Ayan, balik tayo dun sa verdict. Kailan lalabas ang verdict ng ICC dito sa confirmation of charges? It's within 60 calendar days. Anong pinagkaiba ng calendar days? Like, what exactly are calendar days? Just a quick, okay. I will cut myself there. The final day of the confirmation of charges hearing will be starting in about now. Yan. Tayo po ay pakinig na dito sa ating
All rise, veuillez vous lever.
dito sa ating pre-trial chamber 1. Let's go.
The International Criminal Court is now in session. L'audience de la Cour pénale internationale est ouverte. Please be seated. Veuillez vous asseoir.
Good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome everyone in and outside of the courtroom. Court officer, kindly call the case.
Madam President, Your Honors, situation in the Republic of the Philippines in the case of the prosecutor versus Rodrigo Roa Duterte, case reference ICC 0121, 0125, and for the record, we are in open session.
Thank you very much. I would like to ask the parties and participants to confirm that the team composition is the same as yesterday's. Good morning. I can confirm that indeed the OTP is represented by the same staff members. There have been a few changes over the days, but they are all here. The presiding judge, thank you very much, Deputy Prosecutor. Ms. Masida for the legal representatives of victims. Ms. Masida, good morning, Madam President, Your Honors. Same composition as yesterday. Finally, the defense, Mr. Kaufman.
Good morning, Your Honors. We remain the same.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. I would now like to call upon the defense to address the court and to complete their submissions on the merits. We have the time that the defense used, but time we will have a break at 10:30 and then we will continue in the afternoon. So Mr. Kaufman, you must respect the Chamber's decision regarding redactions. Otherwise, I will be obliged to interrupt you each time so as to protect victims and witnesses. Mr. Kaufman, please go ahead.
I do indeed thank Your Honours for that consideration. And we did, in fact, have a short version prepared and a long version prepared. So I'll be reading from the long version and date the redactions that have been so insisted upon, and we respect that, of course, by the prosecution. So I now turn, with respect, Your Honours, to count concern of high-value potential period. And before addressing the individual incidents, prosecution involving so-called targets, it's a preliminary observation. The term high-value target appears throughout the prosecution's brief as though it is evidence of a coordinated plan to eliminate targets. With respect, that inference cannot be sustained. The existence of in a law does not establish a criminal plan. HVT was an operational classification used by law enforcement, and in this it is no different acronym in another country, APOTS, or Australian Priority Organisation Targets. HVT is not a code for an instruction to kill or a witch hunt. It was a prioritization tool within anti-drug operations applied across regions and units on the basis of intelligence assessments, alleged position within drug networks, or inclusion on watch lists. Classification does not imply selection for murder, any more than it is proof of unlawful intent. The prosecution itself acknowledges the existence of formal operational frameworks, including police circulars and structured campaigns. Within those structures, individuals could be designated high value for purposes of operational attention. Many HVT operations, in fact, resulted in arrest or surrender, albeit some resulted in fatal encounters. For this reason, each alleged must be scrutinized on its own evidentiary foundation. When the incidents falling under Count 2 are examined individually, the pattern we submit is similar to those incidents falling under Count 1. Namely, heavy reliance on insider testimony, wishful and selective reading of police reports, and dubious and tenuous linkage to Rodrigo Duterte. Now, the operations cited under Count 2 were conducted within the framework of the lawful war. As such, operational contexts are consistent with planned law enforcement activity, including by-bust operations and coordinated arrests rather than preordained killings. The evidence for Count 2 incidents consistently occurred during armed confrontations in which force was used in response to an imminent threat in accordance with the rules of engagement by President Duterte, namely that lethal force was permissible only where life was in danger. Across the Count 2 incidents, there exist contemporaneous documents, whether it be operational records or firearms recovery reports, all of which reflect legitimate police operations that escalated into exchanges of gunfire. The general record does not substantiate a theory of wanton execution, yet the prosecution relies on the testimony of criminals spilling their hearts with a tacit understanding that they will never be prosecuted. In 4 of the 5 incidents, contemporaneous reports document the recovery of firearms at the scene, indicating that the weapons were used against police and prompting a responsive use of force. 13 and 14, the operations were authorized by judicially issued search warrants. We have diagrams on the screen being shown. I'm not going to stop. They will be presented throughout my presentation continuously, all in an attempt to save time. Those circumstances are squarely within operational legality and fundamentally incompatible with a pre-planned murder. Incident 14 is particularly instructive. 4 individuals were arrested alive. To us, that demonstrates selective and not indiscriminate use of force. In incidents 10, 13, and 14, gunpowder residue was detected on the victim's hands. At a minimum, that forensic finding is consistent with an exchange of gunfire and not consistent with a straightforward execution narrative. And the prosecution and the victim's representatives simply can't have their cake and eat it. They can't say in one breath were planted on victims and therefore dispute crime scene evidence, while at the same time complaining about the lack of crime scene evidence. Yet the prosecution virtually disregards these objective and forensic in favour of an often uncorroborated insider testimony. This is best illustrated in Incident 10, addressed almost 1160 assertion that a firearm was planted at the scene of the official report fabricated. Yet P160 explained that he did not witness the planting of the firearm and merely assumes that it must have happened, before conceding that the firearm may already have been present. Once again, we are in the realm of inadmissible conjecture. We know that an investigation followed that incident. Inquiry is not consistent with the intention to conceal wrongdoing. Beyond that, as I've just mentioned, gunpowder residue on his hand incident, a forensic indicator consistent with an exchange of gunfire and inconsistent with the witness's testimony, which is notably, once again, uncorroborated. Incident 11. This is the sole incident in count 2 where direct linkage to Mr. Duterte is announced. Linkage rests entirely on voice recognition by an individual who claims to have overheard a telephone conversation and recognized the president's voice while being physically moved from one location to another. The alleged recipient of the telephone call himself was interviewed, and on whom the prosecution relies for corroboration did not hear the conversation. After all, would it not have been to all those present in that specific location that the President of the Republic had condescended to discuss matters of such a criminal nature by way of telephone? So the ridiculous assertion stands solely on the word of one single individual. The others, the one who heard nothing, a person for the then President, Rodrigo Duterte, for reasons you will find in PHL OTP 000164220-R01 at 0022, lines 695 to 708. Once again, I can't mention the reasons because it's redacted. Voice recognition in uncontrolled conditions, while being physically moved, and uncorroborated by any forensic or documentary evidence, cannot constitute substantial grounds for confirmation, particularly where it forms the sole mechanism for attribution. Incident 12. This incident relies heavily on a central witness whose credibility is seriously compromised by retaliatory motives he admits to harbouring against Mr. Duterte. This can be found in OTP tab 55 at page 27. Line and another reason that we cannot mention in open session, but which can be found in PHL OTP 0001517- at page 0008. For this particular incident, the case record demonstrates that this operation was conducted pursuant to a judicially issued search warrant, with operational reports and documentation concerning the recovery of firearms. To display such an extensive contemporaneous record, one would expect the prosecution to produce forensic evidence capable of undermining the reliability of these materials, evidence demonstrating fabrication or inconsistency sufficient to reduce their probative value. None, however, has been forwarded, because none presumably exists. This relates to the killing of Mayor Espinosa, whose name I can mention, and Raul Yap, who was shot in a police cell. The prosecution's case is largely premised on a witness who claimed to have heard but admitted not to have seen anything. Thus, there is nothing in the prosecution's evidence to contradict the alternative theory proposed for this incident, which is that there was a firefight between the victims and the officers in the police station Leyte sub-provincial jail. Nor is there a need to enter into these conflicting accounts because the prosecution's own evidence exculpates Rodrigo Duterte for responsibility for this incident. Not that he admits any connection to it. After all, according to the prosecution, on 1 August 2016, Rodrigo Duterte gave Espinosa a 24-hour ultimatum to surrender. And surrender he did the following day. 4 days later, Rodrigo Duterte commended Espinosa for surrendering to Ronald de la Rosa. It was just as well that he did. So if we look at it from the point of view of Rodrigo Duterte, that is where the incident ended, despite Mr. Jeremy exhorting us to believe otherwise. What happened thereafter, as awful as it may be, had nothing to do with our client, and not one witness can say that. The prosecution's narrative in Incident 14, the raid on the house of another person who I can mention, the mayor of Ozmiz City, rests exclusively on a witness who, for reasons we cannot explain in open session, is wholly unable to provide complete or reliable testimony for reasons that can be found in D36, tab 181, lines 128 and lines 101 to 212. Believe that this proceeding something hardly consistent with a premeditated murder scheme. After all, if the intention was cold-blooded murder, why go to the bother of involving a judge? Official investigative materials also indicate that officers approached the premises, announced the execution of the warrant, and were met with gunfire that struck a patrol vehicle and injured an officer, prompting a return of fire. This, so categorically claimed on Tuesday, namely that none of the arresting officers were ever harmed during the transcript. T5, page 44, line 24. In every case, the victim was killed, and none of the arresting officers were harmed. The exchange of fire, as reported, is supported by the fact that gunpowder residue was found on 7 individuals, including the mayor himself, turned out positive on the person of one of the victims, indicating that he had discharged a firearm, something totally negating the gun plant theory proposed by the prosecution's only witness. It is also worth stressing that 4 individuals were arrested alive following the operation, and that one of them was subsequently sentenced to life imprisonment after the domestic courts rejected claims of evidence planting. That fact alone is not consistent with a theory of indiscriminate execution, but is rather consistent instead with arrest and prosecution within the boundaries of the law and not indiscriminate use of force. So to summarize, across incidents 10, absolutely no evidence whatsoever of any attribution to Mr. Duterte on the granular level, nor do we see any evidence of a mutually agreed course of conduct level of government involving Mr. Duterte and his alleged so-called co-perpetrators. The record reflections conducted at unit level, sometimes under judicial warrant. P1166 describes operational discretion resting with the local team leaders, and characterises planned killings as rare and locally motivated. P1066 clarifies not killing, the prosecution's own witness. The Senate committee report refers to rogue uniformed police. To conclude, the evidence reflects decentralization, not indirect co-perpetration. And for these reasons, confirmation on count 2 cannot stand. Now, I'm going to start count 3. We have until 10:30. I'm conscious of the time allotted to me. So count 3 relates to the barangay clearance operations during the presidential period. Incident 15 marks the beginning of the barangay clearance operations. Now, from this point forward, a familiar pattern emerges in the prosecution's narrative. The same modus operandi, to employ Mr. Jeremy's language. Routine buy-bust operations are recast, designed to conceal extrajudicial killings, allegedly ordered from some unspecified source from identified through the use of lists. Well, there's nothing wrong with that. As one witness, an intelligence officer, explains in his testimony, standard once violated on a file on that person would be created as a result of intelligence operations. Then, so claim Mr. Jeremy and Ms. Croft, the target is murdered, reports of rewards are paid out. This, Ms. Croft suggested at transcript 5, page 23, lines 11 to 13, is the systemicity of the pre-planned attack. But this is not the case. The defense can point to contemporaneous official records generated across different units or organizations that show clearly that in the majority of these incidents, the evidence reflects legitimate law enforcement operations involving spontaneous and reported exchanges of fire and use. These are not clandestine acts hidden from scrutiny, Madam President, but rather recorded operations consistent with self-defense in the course of policing. And where the evidentiary record supports competing inferences, including the inference of a lawful armed confrontation and the inference of an unlawful execution, well, and with this I will conclude, in dubio pro reo. 10:30.
Thank you very much. So I've understood that you would like to use the time that remains to you, and you have you still have 20 minutes actually. I understood that you wanted to use that time. Yes, I would, but I'm not so sure if I can include minutes.
Okay. Nous essaierons, Madame.
It's still you? You have the floor. Proceed.
In 49, the Chamber will repeatedly encounter contemporaneous buy-bust or warrant-based documentation, reported exchanges of fire, gunshot residue findings, ballistic testing, immediate hospital transport, internal investigations, and in some cases, prosecution and conviction of officers. Against all of this evidence that you've just seen on the screen here, the prosecution offers single insider accounts of alleged stagings, uncorroborated assertions of weapons planting, nanlabans, unsupported by any forensic evidence, often speculative, frequently contradicted by the alleged co-participants, or yet, more often, complete silence from the alleged co-participants, as they were never even questioned about the incident. And most importantly, despite Mr. Jeremy's assertions on Tuesday that the police reports were repeatedly falsified to legitimate the operations as acts of self-defense, copy-paste reports in which victims were frequently blamed for their own deaths, there is zero proof, none, that the only existing evidence is fabricated. No proof whatsoever of this supposed falsification in the entire case record. Point. Let us just clarify a basic principle, that a state document with the appropriate stamps and signatures and what have you is prima facie reliable, or in other words, it carries a presumption of administrative regularity. And if the prosecution seeks to displace that document and call the entire state it to produce credible, objective evidence, rebut cannot overcome this presumption of authenticity. Correct. Or should the burden shift to the defense to prove that those documents are not falsified? Now, we do not deny that in some instances the record may reveal unlawful conduct by individual officers.
At mukhang eto na naman tayo sa no broadcast redactions.
Here
It
we
has
go
been
again,
done
Mido.
again.
Again.
I'm sorry to say this on broadcast, but it's that GTA
And
meme.
again.
It's
Now,
that GTA meme.
Mido, at this point,
We're in San Andreas again. We're in San
Mido,
Andreas again.
can someone make a count for how many times the Kaufman was redacted?
I believe this has been the 7th. I believe. Tama ba?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, I think it is
Or,
7th, yeah.
8. Oh my god, I was actually right. Thank you, LTG. This is the 7th time the broadcast was abruptly cut dahil I thought he listened to Judge Julia Motok's reprimand
He's gonna
kanina pero
blunder
parang
this.
hindi siya nakikinig.
He's gonna blunder this
This-
bad. So,
We're back.
Referred to a press release, OTP tab 108, in which the police proclaimed that 30
yeah.
in Bulacan big-time operations, and then went on to refer to this as one single operation in which 32 victims were killed by the police in Bulacan. But what Mr. Jeremy failed to tell you, Your Honours, is that one of the prosecution's witnesses that he investigated these deaths in an official capacity. Soon after the 33 people were actually killed in different municipalities, but that their bodies were delivered to Bulacan. This was not, as Mr. Jeremy suggested, a single incident of massacre, rather an improper aggregate of a series of law enforcement operations over the course of 24 hours, executed in large geography, for which we have no evidence in the case record. There's no evidence on the perpetrators, victims, motives, manner of attacks, methodology, in essence, nothing to link them to an alleged fantasy common plan. Stitched to give it. I now turn to incidents reflecting documented armed confrontations. And as mentioned when I first turned to this count, the documentary record, which has reflects attempted arrests, resistance, and responsive use of force. And you've just seen some of the documents up there on the screen. Let's turn briefly to Incident 17, for which the prosecution has relied on a witness who stated that the planting of evidence was an open secret in the locality and province more generally. However, another witness, P1208, states otherwise, that he was never involved in illegal operations resulting in deaths, was not aware of extrajudicial killings disguised as lawful operations, and confirms that there were no standing orders to kill. The operational objective, he explains, was arrest. Lethal force only when the circumstances required it. And you can find this information in Defence tab 96. And we see this pattern again and again and again. In Incident 40, for example, P1131, who worked with the individual alleged to have shot the suspect, stated clearly that the killings occurred only in circumstances of lawful use of self-defence. That can be found at Defence tab 74, and you can see it on the screen as well. This type of testimonial evidence is also corroborated by documentary and forensic evidence. Incident 15, the prosecution again resorts to its usual pro forma narrative. But what it is prove this. Whereas I urge your honours to look at the screen where you can see detailed documentary evidence about how this incident came about, and I summarise: a spontaneous exchange of fire after the suspect discharged a firearm, ballistics testing of the officer's weapon, affidavits by the police officers involved, and formal review and investigation of the officer who fired his weapon. Now, I'm not going to sit here and bore you with all the evidence we have on every single one of these incidents, but what I will tell you, Your Honours, is that we have proving attempts, arrests, armed resistance, and responsive and sometimes disciplined use of force in no less than 13 incidents. I don't know where Mr. Butoyan got the idea from that there's no forensic evidence left in the case record. And may we remind you, Your Honours, these and for incidents substantiated by a single witness narrative and unconfirmed by alleged co-participants, I refer Your Honours to no less than 9 incidents. One prosecution witness, P1160, is the sole testimonial evidence for at least 3 incidents. Another 6 incidents on the What's interesting about these incidents is that P3 alleged that he was only one of a group of 3 or 4 perpetrators. And these other perpetrators are actually also prosecution witnesses. Yet none of the other witnesses, not one. A couple of incidents alleged by the prosecution appear on its own evidence to be unrelated to drug enforcement, and thus questionably part of the fantasy common plan or organisation policy. For this, I would refer you to incidents 31 and 41, which involved targeting of 2 individuals. Again, I can mention the type of conduct without revealing the identity, so I shall refrain from doing so. The prosecution has not presented any evidence to substantiate any nexus to anti-drug operations in either of these incidents. And for this, I refer you to D36, tab 158, at page. On the perpetrator's own account, the trigger for the killing was a personal grievance relating to property damage. There are numerous incidents against unidentified or improperly identified victims. The victim in incident 45 is just as in incident 38, another incident on which Mr. Jeremy focused on Tuesday. And, by the way, on the subject of the killing of children, of course it ticks the right boxes for the prosecution insofar as it pulls the heartstrings. But apart from Kian de los Santos, the prosecution has not, despite its emphasis on children, presented to this chamber during these proceedings any evidence that even one victim, apart from Kian, in its 49 incidents, evidence, nothing. Incidents involving minors are indeed grave. Article 61 requires proof, not emotion. It is for the prosecution to prove that the children were involved in these incidents, and not for the defence to prove. Now, this evidentiary deficit extends even further. The Bulacan Provincial Office provided a certificate indicating that it had no record corresponding to the names of the victims, whose names have been redacted on the slide, which we will show you. Okay, but we'll pass on. But their names have been redacted. And these are alleged police killings, yet no operational report. Indeed, no contemporaneous documentation whatsoever has been produced. So on what does the prosecution base its claim that these individuals were murdered by the police? 3. The prosecution relies almost exclusively on the account of P3 echoed by P8. And this is rather ironic. Does the prosecutor claim that P3 is corroborated by P8 when the source of P8's information is in fact P3 himself? Bootstrapping logic, once again. The alleged direct perpetrator, P1201, stated during his interview that he had never participated in an operation involving a child. The other officer allegedly present during both incidents, P1131, was never questioned about these events by the prosecution. And that omission, we submit, is not neutral.
Mukhang maubos na naman ang brain cells ng mga sane people. And I am saying sane people. The insane people will, yeah, you know what's gonna
That's
happen.
the 8th time in a row now. Hoffman, this is not going anywhere. Trust me.
Tapos na pa.
Yep.
Sabi ni Mevs, happy birthday. Tapos na pala. Yun na pala yun. Yun na yung yun na yung final session daw. That's gonna be the final session at this point, you know? We're not gonna hear. We're not gonna hear anymore. Okay, we're back. Lucy, hello.
Therefore, cannot simultaneously be characterized as manifestations of a centrally designed OTBT plan outside of that plan. And it does not reflect what the prosecution on Tuesday described as systematic features of a national. Instead, according to P3, the motive was personal financial gain through the sale of bodies. And if P3's account is accepted, It reflects opportunistic actions for personal gain of the most macabre kind. As held in Al-Hassan, an opportunistic act committed for personal profit without more falls outside the common plan. Now, just to finish up quickly on the issue of identity, in Incident 43, even the alleged perpetrators are not identified. Without identification, the Chamber cannot assess their institutional affiliation to make any possible linkage to Mr. Duterte. One more thing, Your Honours. The prosecution focused for some time on Incident 23. I can mention his name. Benjamin. Mr. Jeremy
How
made compelling
many
footage of
times
Mr. arrest.
are you? How many times?
And
This
again.
is like this is like
Nine,
the
nine,
ninth time
nine.
this is happening since yesterday. 9 times he's brought up redacted. Somebody who's supposed to be redacted from the file, somebody who's not supposed to be said, with identity sa section, it's back.
And when
Okay.
Mr. Visda was taken away on the motorcycle, the fact that while handcuffed, he attempted to grab the gun of one of the policemen, leading to a struggle and prompting the motorbike to fall over and the policeman to shoot Mr. Visda twice in self-defense. And that this PNP report appears to be the prosecution witness, whose testimony fully aligns with the substance of the police document. Mr. Jeremy claimed that the PNP reports were false, relying solely on the allegation of one witness that the scene was staged. This witness claimed that the handcuffs were removed from the victim, that the body was loaded on the tricycle a few minutes after being shot and then brought to the hospital. However, his account is contradicted by the very picture the prosecution has shown you on Tuesday. Indeed, it appears that the prosecution is submitted, which undermines its own witness's testimony. As you can see here, handcuffs are on. The body is on the ground rather than on a tricycle. Photojournalists are also present. This contradiction was even noted by the prosecution's investigators at the time of the interview and was put to the witness. The investigators, what did that witness say? I don't know if I can.
Number 10. Redaction
And
number
again.
10. Okay, this is redaction number 10. He has done 3 redactions so far.
Please, again.
He's done. I believe he's done 4 now. 3 ba o 4 ang kanyang redactions
The body
dito.
wasn't even on the floor, Sofran. What are you talking about? Look. I even got that on capture.
Vertical linkage to Mr.
Sabi ng mainstream media dito, no?
Nga.
Duterte. Or has the prosecution 2 minutes left. And finally, with regard to count 3, the prosecution's witnesses themselves concede that there was no formal approval process. Targets were selected without validation, officers acted for personal reasons, and decisions were taken locally. All of this destroys the assertion that there was a mutually. We'll elaborate. P1160 claims while simultaneously acknowledging officers' autonomous killings for personal motives. Those propositions cannot comfortably coexist. P3 explains that certain officers acted outside any common plan and for opportunistic reasons. See Incident 38. In Incident 49, P1207 attributes instructions to local officers without evidence of communication or direction from higher authorities. And most significantly, P1207 1206, once again abiding by the redactions, Tokhang operations and killings ceased. Madam President, Your Honours, the dependence on specific individuals, not an enduring organisational policy. A system-wide, common continued presence of a non-fungible local official. And with this, I conclude.
George Motok, thank you very much, Mr. Hoffman. The arguments on the merits have been heard. We will now break for 40 minutes up to 10:30. After we return, we will continue with the closing arguments or submissions, starting with the OTP. Thank you very much. Court is suspended.
And the first session has just concluded. Anima, you
I
would
know, Mido, I
you're
know.
probably gonna laugh at just how many times
Yeah, this,
Um,
this, to be honest, what
it's
government
crazy
is
at this
doing,
point.
it's not a defense anymore. It's personal.
Parang I'm reading some stuff from Twitter na parang paawa na lang daw ito para sa susunod na election. Like they're making this a political matter when it is not. When it is not something political, this is a legal matter.
It's legal. If it was look, we're still 2 years away from the 2028 elections, and you think that's political? No. Ain't no way that's a political stunt, to be honest.
So yung pag-aresto kay Duterte is a political stunt? But
Legal.
what is their aim? I mean, if it was a political, if it was a political stunt, yung pag-aresto kay Duterte, anong aim nila doon, 'di ba?
Yeah, I agree with you there, to be honest. Duterte was arrested because of his crimes. Simple as that. Why would you even involve politics in it, to be honest? Sure, there's some politics in it because Duterte was a president, but it doesn't underlie the fact that he committed legal violations, which is why he was arrested by the ICC. That's what we can't deny.
So I think we will be going on a break.
Yes.
Magbabalik po ang Duterte sa ICC, ang koolNews special coverage ng confirmation of charges hearing ni dating Pangulong Rodrigo Duterte matapos ang ilang paalala.
Pagkagising sa umaga na kumain ng sapat, gatas ang kailangan para lumusog ang katawan, pero may solusyon dyan. Ito ang MSI Gatas. Uminom ng MSI Gatas.
Ada Morella po, mag-MSA Gatas para iinumin ang gatas. Sarap. Mag-MSA Gatas na. 69 na piso SRP sa suking tindahan.
The use of milk supplements must only be upon the advice of a health professional.
Wala kaming commercial. Pwera na lang sa commercial nito, oo naman. Pero, meron ba kaming bagong produkto? Meron ba kaming iaalok sa inyo? Meron ba kaming kinuhang artista o sikat na personalidad para i-endorse kung anong mang inaalok namin? Siyempre, ang sagot niyan, wala. Literal na wala. Wala kami niyan, chong.
Innova Power G6. Fast, sleek, reliable, affordable. Now equipped with Ryzen 7000 series CPU, Radeon RX 7000 series, 1TB SSD storage, and 32GB RAM. Enough to fulfill your needs.
Innova.
Make your sauce tastier with O-Spend mayonnaise. Mix, dip, and eat. Sarap. Make your meals deliciously neat with O-Spend mayonnaise.
Iron, taurine, and B vitamins is the key for PD Cola.
PD Cola!
25 pesos lang, sang ka ba?
Uminom ka ng tinted cola sa isang malakas na lasa para masigla ang araw mo. Try na! Sarap, di ba? Available din sa mga bayan na walang sugar at 500 ml at 1 litro ng bote. Tinted Cola, refresh your life.
At magbabalik para masabi ang ito muna kami dito muna kami magpapaalam, dito muna magtatapos ang unang parte ng koolNews special coverage sa confirmation of charges hearing ni dating Pangulong Rodrigo Duterte. Ito ang Duterte sa ICC. Magbabalik kami ng alas 8 ng gabi para sa ikalawa at huling parte ng special coverage na ito. Susunod na ang TV Patrol.